So problem 2 of the Calc Knowledge pretest asks us to determine which of the three graphs is the graph f of x and the first derivative f of x and the second derivative of f of x. And this is going to take a good bit of logic and understanding of the relationship between the derivative of a graph and a graph. So here, I've just put a key relationship between the graph and its derivative. So when the graph of a function f of x is increasing, then the derivative of that graph is positive and vice versa. And what I mean by that is when f of x is increasing, the derivative of that graph is above the x-axis. And vice versa, when f of x is decreasing, the slope is negative, then the derivative of that graph is below the x-axis. So this is going to help us figure out which one is the derivative of which graphs. And second derivative is just a derivative of the first derivative. So we can just use that to find the relationship between all three graphs. So let's choose a point to analyze. We should look at this point. And I'm looking at this point because a lot of interesting things are happening at this point that can give away which graph is which. For example, one graph, the red graph, B, is going from below the x-axis to above it. The blue graph is going from above the x-axis to below it. And the green graph is turning from increasing to decreasing. So let's say we want to guess that the green graph is f of x. So let's see if it has a first and second derivative. So the green graph is increasing, and then it starts to decrease. So we know that the derivative of that graph has to be positive while this is increasing and negative while this is decreasing. And if you look at it, we see that the blue graph actually fulfills our requirement. While the green graph is increasing, the blue graph is above the x-axis. As soon as the green graph starts to decrease, the blue graph goes below the x-axis. And now that the green graph keeps decreasing, the blue graph stays below the x-axis. So we can say that the blue graph is equal to the derivative of the green one. Just to be sure that the red function is not the derivative of the green one, let's just check. So we know that while this graph is increasing, its derivative should be above the x-axis. The red function is below the x-axis, so we know for sure that the red function is not the derivative of the green function. So let's see if the red graph is the derivative of the blue function. So the blue function is increasing, and the red function is below the x-axis. So we know again for sure that the red function is not the derivative of the blue function. And if it's not the derivative of the blue function or the green function, then it must be the original graph, f of x. And we already know the order. We know that if the red function is f of x, we know that the blue function is the derivative of the green function. So that must mean that the green function is f prime of x, and the blue function is f prime double prime of x. So let's just make sure that this works. So while the red function is increasing, it keeps increasing until this point. So that must mean that the green function must be above the x-axis until this point. And indeed it is. As soon as the red function starts decreasing, the green function goes below the x-axis. It turns negative. So that's a check. And we already proved that the blue function is a derivative of the green function. So we sorted it out and figured out the relationship between all three functions.